Imagine saving a life from another world, an alien child on the brink of death. You bring her back to life only to discover that she wants more than just your help. She wants to be part of your family. But what happens when you become her protector and the line between human and alien begins to blur? This is a story you won't believe, of survival, trust, and a bond that defies everything we know. It was a quiet evening when everything changed. The sky, usually calm, was disrupted by a strange light bright, almost blinding, streaking across the horizon. At first I thought it was just another shooting star, the kind we all love to wish on. But then it grew larger, much too large, and it was coming straight towards me. The sound of it ripping through the sky was like nothing I'd ever heard before, something between a roar and a hum, sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I stood frozen in place, staring as the light grew brighter, closer. The air around me seemed to vibrate almost as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then, without warning, it hit. The crash was deafening, sending a shockwave through the earth, knocking me off my feet. Dust and debris filled the air, obscuring everything around me. For a moment, I could hardly breathe. When the dust settled, I stood up, heart pounding in my chest. My eyes scanned the wreckage, the remnants of what appeared to be some sort of ship, strange, metallic, and unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't a plane, and it wasn't a meteor. This was something ... different, something out of this world. I took a cautious step forward, my curiosity outweighing the fear that bubbled up inside me. As I neared the wreckage, I saw her. At first I thought I was imagining things, this tiny, pale figure lying among the twisted wreckage. Her small, fragile body was barely moving. She looked almost human, but there was something off about her. Her skin had an otherworldly hue, a soft bluish tint that shimmered slightly under the dim light. I knelt beside her, my hands trembling. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, a faint glow emanating from her tiny body. Panic set in. I didn't know what to do. This wasn't just any child. This was something alien. As I reached out to touch her, something in me knew I couldn't leave her there to die. I wasn't sure how I managed it, but I picked her up, cradling her small body in my arms. There was no time to think, no time to question. I had to get her somewhere safe, somewhere she could survive. The night had just begun, and my life was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. Little did I know. Saving her life would lead to a connection far deeper than I ever thought possible, one that would challenge everything I believed about family, survival, and what it truly means to be human. As I rushed her to the nearest hospital, my heart raced faster than ever. The thought of what I was holding in my arms, the fragile little alien child, sent waves of panic through me. What if she didn't survive? What if the doctors couldn't help her? What if I was about to make a mistake that would change everything forever? The drive felt like it took forever. I had no idea what to tell the doctors when I arrived, no way to explain how I had found her or why she looked so different. I couldn't even fathom how I was supposed to explain this to anyone, but I had no choice. Couldn't just leave her in the middle of nowhere. When I finally burst through the hospital doors, I was met with surprised and confused looks. I didn't wait for any questions. I rushed straight to the emergency room, where a team of doctors and nurses quickly swarmed around me. They didn't ask about the bizarre circumstances. They just went into action, trying to assess her condition. The doctors did what they could, but nothing seemed to make sense. The medical machines beeped and flashed, unable to get a clear read on her vitals. Her body was unlike anything they had seen before. First doctor, a seasoned professional, took one look and said what I was too terrified to admit. Not sure we can help her? She's not like any patient we've ever treated. I watched them work on her, their faces grim, their hands quick. But no matter how hard they tried, the child's pulse remained weak, and the strange glow around her didn't seem to fade. Her skin had a softness to it that didn't belong to earthly creatures. It was as if she was made of something else, something foreign. I didn't know how much time we had before it was too late. Hours passed, and the hospital began to quiet down. The doctors couldn't give me a clear answer. I could see the skepticism in their eyes, even as they tried to save her. Just too different. One of them muttered to the others when they thought I wasn't listening. This doesn't make sense, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to give up on her. Not after I had already promised myself that I would protect her. She was in my care now, and I would do whatever it took to keep her alive. I stayed by her side the whole night. The glow around her intensified, and then, just as I thought I was losing hope, something incredible happened. The light around her body flickered, and she took a deep breath. A loud gasp, almost like a cry, erupted from her tiny form. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing large, dark pupils that stared at me with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. It was as if she was looking right through me, as if she knew everything I was thinking. There was a moment of complete silence, and then she whispered, her voice weak but clear, "Thank you." I was in shock. This wasn't possible. She shouldn't be alive. She shouldn't be talking. Yet here she was, breathing, conscious, and speaking words I could understand. And then she looked up at me again, her voice trembling. "Will you? Will you be my family?" Those words hit me like a wave. Family. It was a word that felt so out of place. But in that moment, as I stared into her large, innocent eyes, I realized something I had already made my decision. No matter what this was, no matter how impossible it seemed, I would protect her. She was now part of my world, and I would do whatever it took to keep her safe. But little did I know, this was just the beginning of something far greater than either of us could have imagined. The days that followed her awakening were a whirlwind of emotions and confusion. I couldn't quite grasp what had happened, how this tiny, otherworldly child had survived against all odds and was now looking to me for something I wasn't sure I could give. Family. But every time I looked into her eyes, the question lingered, and my heart seemed to answer before my mind could even catch up. She didn't speak much after that first encounter, but when she did, it was always with a mixture of awe and desperation. "Where am I?" she would ask in a soft, trembling voice. "Who are you?"
Ow.
I didn't have answers. I couldn't even explain how I felt, let alone explain who she was or where she came from. The doctors were baffled. The government was starting to take an interest, and the world around me seemed to shift, as if everything I knew was about to unravel. But what struck me the most was the way she looked at me. She wasn't afraid. Not like I would expect. Instead, she seemed to trust me in a way that was almost instinctual. One night, after a long day of tests and questions I didn't have answers to, I sat with her in my living room. She was perched on the couch beside me, her small hands folded in her lap, staring at the flickering lights on the TV screen. I wasn't sure how to explain the situation to her, but when I turned to look at her, I saw something new, a glimmer of understanding in her eyes, as if she knew exactly what I was thinking. "Are you my family now?" she asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Her voice wavered, and I could see the weight of her question hanging in the air, pressing down on me. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't sure how I could be her family, given the way she looked and the mystery surrounding her. But in that moment, something in my chest softened. I realized that in a world full of uncertainties, this small alien child had no one else to turn to. I was all she had. I hesitated for a moment, but then I reached out and placed my hand gently on her shoulder. "Yes," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was anything but. "I'm your family now." Her eyes lit up and a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corners of her lips. It wasn't just a smile of relief, it was a smile of hope. And that was enough to solidify everything for me. I didn't need to understand all the details. I didn't need to have all the answers. What I did need was to be there for her. From that day on, she called me Mama. It wasn't something I had expected, but the name slipped out so naturally, as if it had always been meant for me. Every time she said it, my heart swelled, and I knew deep down that this child, this alien being from another world, had already become my own. As the days turned into weeks, I began to notice subtle changes in her behavior. She was adapting, learning quickly, and starting to mimic the things I did, the way I moved and spoke. It was almost as if she was studying me, trying to understand this strange human world she had entered. But it wasn't just that. I could feel a connection growing between Usaban that was impossible to ignore. We didn't need to talk to communicate. There were moments when we simply sat together in silence, and I could sense her emotions, her thoughts, almost as if they were mine. It was both terrifying and beautiful at the same time. There was something about her that made me believe we were more alike than I ever thought possible. As I cared for her, I realized something that would change everything. She wasn't just learning to be human. Some ways she was teaching me what it meant to love without limits, to care for someone even when you don't know their past, their history, or their true nature. And with each passing day, it became more clear that this little alien child was indeed just some creature I had found by accident. She was a part of me now, as much as I was a part of her. And together, we would face whatever challenges the future held because we had become family in the truest sense of the word. As the days passed, it became clear that our quiet life together was slipping away. The tension outside our little bubble grew, and it wasn't long before the authorities began to catch on. It started with small things in marked cars parked on the street near my house, strangers watching from a distance, whispers that I couldn't hear but felt in my gut. It was as if the world was slowly starting to close in on us. The media didn't help either. There were rumors circulating about an unidentified object crashing in the woods nearby. Some claimed it was a meteorite. Others insisted it was a military experiment gone wrong. No one seemed to know the truth, but everyone was looking for answers. The questions were piling up, and with each passing day, I feared someone would put the pieces together. They'd realize that the child I was caring for was no ordinary girl, and that her arrival on Earth was far from accidental. One evening, while I was making dinner, I noticed her standing by the window, staring outside with an intensity I hadn't seen before. Her usual curiosity seemed replaced by something darker, something I couldn't place. "What's wrong?" I asked, approaching her cautiously. Her gaze didn't shift from the window, but I could feel the unease in her. "They're looking for me," she said softly, almost as if she were speaking to herself. I asked, my heart racing, "Who's looking for you?" She turned her gaze to me, her dark eyes filled with an unsettling wisdom. "They are." She pointed to the sky. "The ones who sent me here." A chill ran down my spine. Until that moment, I had been so focused on protecting her from the world outside that I had done. She considered the possibility of someone or something looking for her from beyond our planet. But now it seemed undeniable. Whatever this child was, she wasn't just an innocent being who had crash-landed by accident. She was someone's something important. And whoever sent her here wasn't going to let her stay hidden for long. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was just the usual paranoia from living in a world that was ready for an alien child. It felt more real, more dangerous. I heard faint noises outside the house, footsteps, the sound of vehicles coming and going in the distance. I wasn't sure if they were just people looking for answers, or if they were something more sinister. The next morning, I noticed a strange symbol etched into the dirt near my front door. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but there it was, an alien-like symbol I had never seen before. I felt my blood run cold. Whoever had sent her here wasn't just watching, they were marking their territory. They were coming, and they weren't going to stop until they had her. I had no idea what would happen next. I didn't know how much longer I could keep her safe, but I did know one thing. I would fight to the end to protect her. She had become more than just a strange child in my care. She was my responsibility now. If it meant facing whatever dangers were out there, whether human or alien, I would stand by her side no matter the cost. Because in the end, she was my family, and I would never let anyone take her away. As the days passed, the signs of danger grew more pronounced. The unmarked cars started showing up more frequently, and one night I even saw a shadowy figure lurking near the edge of the woods. The feeling of being hunted, of being pursued, was no longer just an instinct, it was real. We weren't alone, and we couldn't hide forever. But in her eyes, I saw something that gave me strength, a quiet resolve. She had known all along that this day would come. She had known that her past would eventually catch up with her. But as she looked at me, her gaze unwavering, I realized something that struck me to my core. No matter how dangerous things became, we were in this together. The tension was unbearable. Every day it felt like we were holding our breath, waiting for something to happen. The outside world seemed to close in around us, and the quiet moments we shared, those small, peaceful moments, became harder and harder to come by. I knew I couldn't protect her forever. The danger wasn't just a possibility anymore. It was real. It happened one evening when the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the front yard. I was in the kitchen, preparing a quick dinner, when I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling up outside. I rushed to the window, my heart racing. It wasn't just one car, it was a convoy unmarked, their dark windows reflecting the dying light. A chill ran down my spine. I knew they were here. "They've found us," I whispered, my voice trembling. I turned to look at her, but she wasn't in the living room. Panic set in for a split second as I ran through the house, calling her name. "Where are you?" Then I saw her. She was standing by the back door, her gaze fixed on the approaching vehicles, her posture stiff. It's almost like she was waiting for something or someone. She wasn't scared. In fact, she looked calm to calm. "They're here," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "It's time." I didn't know what she meant by that, but I knew one thing. We weren't going to let them take her. Not without a fight. I grabbed her by the hand, pulling her away from the door. "We need to leave," I said urgently. "Now," but she didn't move. Instead, she looked at me, her eyes darkening with an emotion I couldn't understand. "I'm not running anymore," she said quietly. "I have to face them." My heart skipped a beat. "No, you don't have to face anyone. We'll leave. We'll go somewhere safe." But she shook her head, her expression hardening. "They came for me. They're not going to stop until they have me. But if I go with them, I'll never be free." The realization hit me like a slap across the face. She wasn't just a child trying to survive. She was caught in something much bigger, something far beyond what either of us had expected. She was part of a larger plan, one that we hadn't fully understood. And those people out there, those strange figures, they weren't just looking for a lost child. They were looking for her because she was important. I tried to reason with her. "You don't have to face this alone. We can figure this out together. I won't let them take you." But her eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw the depth of her fear. "You can't protect me from everything," she said, her voice filled with quiet sadness. "But I don't want to put you in danger anymore. You've done more for me than anyone ever could. You gave me a family. I couldn't argue with that." She had become my family, in every sense of the word. And now it seemed it was time to let her make her own choice. The sound of footsteps outside grew louder, and I knew it was only a matter of moments before they reached the door. My heart pounded in my chest as I faced her, torn between wanting to run and knowing that I couldn't force her to run if she didn't want to. Then, without warning, the door burst open, and there they were. The figures from the convoy, tall and shadowy, their eyes hidden behind dark glasses, their presence radiating authority. They didn't speak at first, just standing there, studying us with an unsettling calm. "We've come for her," one of them finally spoke, his voice cold, emotionless. I stepped in front of her instinctively, my hands outstretched in a defensive gesture. "You're not taking her," I said, my voice shaking with fear and determination. But she stepped forward, standing beside me, her small hand reaching out to touch my arm. "It's okay," she said softly, her voice steady. "I'll go with them." The words hit me harder than any blow could have. "No!" I protested, my voice breaking. "I can't let you go. You're my family." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a sadness that tore at my heart. "You've given me everything I needed. But I have to face this now." I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to scream, to beg her to stay with me, to keep running, to keep fighting. But deep down, I knew she was right. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was about something much bigger. The men stepped closer, their hands moving as if they had no intention of harming us, as that the tension in the air was palpable. And then, as if on cue, she looked at them and nodded. "I'm ready," she said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her and run, but something inside me told me that this was her choice. I had to let her make it. The fight wasn't mine to fight anymore. Figures moved in closer, surrounding us, but I didn't feel fear for myself. I felt fear for her. What would happen to her now? What would she face once she left with them? With one last look at me, she gave a small, sad smile. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." And just like that, the door closed behind them, and she was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. The door closed behind them with a finality that shook me to my core. For a moment, I stood frozen, staring at the empty space where she had just been. The silence in the room felt suffocating, as if the world itself had paused, holding its breath. The strange, alien child who had come into my life so unexpectedly, who had become more than just someone I was protecting, she was gone. My legs gave out beneath me, and I sank to the floor. The emotions that had been building up inside me, fear, confusion, Love came crashing down all at once. I had promised her I wouldn't let them take her. I had promised to protect her. And now I had failed. But even as I sat there, defeated, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. No, this was just another beginning, a new chapter in the strange, unpredictable journey I had found myself on. I had no idea where she was or what was going to happen to her, but I knew I had to find a way to get her back. I picked myself up, wiping my face with the back of my hand. I couldn't just sit here, not after everything that had happened. I couldn't let this be the last memory I had of her, the image of her walking away, her small form swallowed up by the darkness of the night. I grabbed my phone and dialed the one person I hoped could help. My contact at the local police station. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "This is Detective Morris," he said, his voice steady. "Maurice, it's me." "I need your help," I said, my voice frantic. "They took her. The people who came for her, they took my daughter. I don't know where they're going, but I need to find her." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Slow down. Who are they? And who are you talking about? Listen to me." I almost shouted. "I'm talking about an alien child. She's not from here. They've been looking for her, and they finally took her. They're going to do something terrible to her." "You don't understand. They've been planning this for months." Detective Morris didn't say anything at first. Then, in a calm but firm tone, he spoke. "I need you to stay calm. I can help you if you didn't tell me what's going on here. Who are these people?" I could hear his skepticism, but I wasn't about to back down. "I know this sounds insane. I know it does. But I'm telling you, she's not like us. I didn't know what I was getting into when I took her in, but now I do. These people, they're connected to her. They're not just some random group. They're part of something bigger. And I need to find her before it's too late." Another silence. "All right. I'll see what I can do. But you need to keep your head on straight. We'll figure this out, okay?" I hung up the phone, still unsure if I had made the right choice by calling him. He was a good cop, but I didn't know if he could help me with something this otherworldly. But I had to try. I had to find a way to get her back. The next few days were a blur. I spent every waking moment trying to track down any clue I could find, trying to get in touch with anyone who might know something. But every lead came up empty. The authorities weren't talking. No one in the town seemed to know anything. It was as if she had just vanished, as if no one cared about the alien child who had briefly become part of my world. And then, one morning, I received a call that changed everything. "Is this Mrs. Carter?" a voice asked on the other end. "Yes," I said, holding my breath. "You're looking for the child. The one they took? I can help you." I felt my pulse quicken. "Who is this?" "You don't need to know my name," the voice replied, "but I know where they're keeping her. I know how to get her back." I was speechless for a moment, barely able to process what I was hearing. "How?" I managed to choke out. "They've been keeping her at a facility. It's hidden, but I have access. There's a way in. If you're willing to risk everything, I can help you get her out." I knew in that moment that my life had just been turned upside down once again. I had no idea who this person was, or if I could trust them, but I also knew that this was the chance I had been waiting for. For the first time since they had taken her, I felt a glimmer of hope, but this was just the beginning. I had no idea what I would face in the days ahead, but I was ready. I had to be, because one thing was certain: I wasn't giving up on her. I was going to get my daughter back. No one was going to stop me. The call ended abruptly, leaving me with a mix of disbelief and hope. The voice on the other end had been calm, calculated, and eerily confident, but it left me with more questions than answers. Who was this person? Why were they helping me? More importantly, how could they possibly know where they were keeping her? I spent the night pacing, unable to settle my thoughts. The urgency I had been feeling ever since she had been taken had only intensified. I couldn't afford to waste another moment. I needed to act. The next morning, I met with Detective Morris again. This time, his attitude was different, more serious, more understanding. I hadn't told him everything, not about the alien nature of the child, nor about the mysterious caller, but I needed him on my side. He was my best shot at navigating whatever this was, whatever it had become. He listened quietly as I recounted everything the voice had told me, the location of the facility, the risks, and how they claimed to be able to help. He didn't interrupt, but his eyes narrowed as I spoke. By the time I finished, he was silent for a long time. So you're telling me that someone, some anonymous source, claims to know where this child is being held and you're trusting them? He asked slowly. I nodded. I have no choice. This is the only lead I have. If I don't go now, I may never get another chance. Maurice stood up and walked to the window, looking out for a long moment. I don't like this, but I understand why you're doing it, he said finally. I've seen too many cases where the truth is buried, and it takes people like you to dig it up. But you need to be careful. This is not just about a missing child anymore. If there's a facility, a group, behind all of this, it's bigger than anything we've dealt with. I know, I said quietly. I'm not backing down. He turned around, and his expression softened. I'll help you, he said. We'll go in together. But we have to do this smartly. We can't just barge in, guns blazing. We need intel. We need backup. I felt a rush of relief, but it was brief. The truth was, no amount of planning could prepare us for what we were about to face. The voice had warned me that getting in wouldn't be easy. The facility wasn't just heavily guarded, it was designed to be impenetrable. And yet, here we were, making plans to infiltrate it, with little more than a vague address and an unverified promise of help. That afternoon, I found myself standing in front of a warehouse on the outskirts of town. The area was isolated, tucked away behind trees and overgrown fields, far from prying eyes. The moment I arrived, a cold shiver ran down my spine. The place was eerily quiet. Too quiet. I had expected it to be guarded, watched, but there was no sign of life. No vehicles, no security. Morris looked at me, his face grim. This is it then. You sure about this? I nodded. We don't have a choice. The entrance was locked, but it didn't take much for Morris to break in. We slipped inside, our footsteps echoing in the large, empty space. The dim lighting made the place feel even more abandoned. It looked like any old warehouse, except for the strange equipment scattered across the floor and the faint hum of machinery hidden deep within the building. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a simple holding facility. This was something more. It was a lab. I motioned for Morris to follow me, and we moved deeper into the building, carefully avoiding the obvious traps and sensors. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. What were they doing here? Were they experimenting on her? I couldn't stop myself from thinking the worst. We reached a narrow hallway at the back of the warehouse. The door at the end of it was slightly ajar, and from behind it I could hear muffled voices. I held my breath. This was it. We were close. The source had been right. The child, my daughter, was here. I turned to Morris. This is it, I whispered. We go in together. He nodded, his face set in determination. I could see the same fear in his eyes that I felt in my gut, but there was no turning back now. We pushed the door open, and what we saw inside made my blood run cold. There, strapped to a table in the center of a sterile clinical room, lay the child. Her small body was connected to strange wires, glowing softly, the hum of the machinery surrounding her. She was unconscious, but even in that state I could see the faintest signs of distress, the twitching of her fingers. It was as though she was aware of something, aware of the danger, but was unable to escape. Before I could move, a voice echoed through the room. I wouldn't move if I were you. A figure stepped out from the shadows. He was tall, dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by a mask. His eyes glowed faintly, like they were powered by something beyond human ability. The moment I saw him, I knew we were out of our depth. Who are you? I demanded, stepping forward. What are you doing to her? He didn't respond right away. Instead, he raised a hand, and a soft, almost mechanical whirring noise filled the air. A barrier, an invisible force field, slowly began to form between us and the child. You're too late, the man said, his voice cold. She's already ours. The room spun around me, the walls closing in. I had thought we had found her. But now, standing in front of this man, this stranger who seemed to know more about her than I did, I realized that the fight for her freedom was just beginning. The moment the barrier flickered into existence, a sense of hopelessness washed over me. It was as if the walls of the room and the weight of everything we had worked for were suddenly closing in. The child, my daughter, was mere feet away, and yet it felt as if an insurmountable chasm had been placed between us. The figure in front of us, his glowing eyes watching me with cold precision, spoke again, his tone almost bored. You should have stayed out of this. You don't understand what she is, what she means. She's not just a lost child, not just a refugee from some crash site. She is a weapon, a key to something much bigger than your small human world can handle. I clenched my fists, fighting back the rush of panic that threatened to rise up within me. This wasn't just about saving her anymore. It was about stopping whatever this man and his group had planned for her and for all of us. Who are you? I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. What do you want with her? She's just a child. The man's lips curled into a smile, one that was anything but reassuring. She's not just any child. She's a living, breathing piece of advanced alien technology, and now she's ours to control. You can't protect her from this. No one can. My heart sank at his words. Alien technology? Was she really just a tool? A weapon in someone's grand design? No, I refused to believe that. I couldn't. She was my family. She was more than that. I had to save her, no matter the cost. Suddenly, the barrier between us and the child hummed louder, crackling with energy. The man raised his hand, and the force field grew stronger, shimmering like glass. It was obvious now. The facility wasn't just a holding cell. It was a containment area. They had planned for someone like me, someone who might try to rescue her. I had to act fast. I glanced at Maurice, who was standing behind me, his face tense with fear. He could see the same thing I did. We had no time. Couldn't fight this man head and knot with whatever technology he was controlling, but we could escape. We had to. Look around, I whispered to Morris, my mind racing. There has to be a way out. A back door, an emergency exit. Anything. Morris nodded, quickly scanning the room. His eyes flicked toward a small panel near the back wall, just above the floor. There, he muttered under his breath, emergency override. If we can get to it, we might be able to disable the barrier. The man chuckled from across the room, sensing our growing desperation. You think you can just turn it off? You have no idea what you're dealing with. There's no way out. It's not for you and not for her. But I wasn't listening anymore. I locked eyes with Morris, and without another word, we moved in sync, each step calculated, each movement deliberate. The man was distracted, his attention on the child and the machinery. He didn't see us creeping toward the panel. My heart raced as I sprinted toward the wall, hoping against hope that we had enough time. Barrier between us and the child pulsed violently, glowing brighter with every second. The room was closing in, and if we didn't act fast, we would never make it out. I reached the panel first, crouching down to examine it. My hands shook as I tried to make sense of the alien technology in front of me. There were no familiar buttons, no labels I could read, but I knew I had to make it work. We didn't have a choice. Morris, keep him distracted, I hissed. Morris took a deep breath, and without hesitating, lunged forward. Hey, he shouted, drawing the man's attention. You really think she's the only one who matters here? The man turned sharply, his glowing eyes narrowing at Maurice. And what are you talking about? He asked, his voice low, almost amused. Morris didn't give him time to think. I'm not just going to stand by while you try to control her. You don't know what she's capable of. You think she's some kind of tool? You're wrong. The man took a step forward, clearly irritated, but that was all the time I needed. I slammed my hand down on the panel, pressing every button I could reach, desperate to stop the barrier from getting any stronger. The lights around me flickered, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, with a sudden surge, the barrier went dark. The humming sound stopped, and the oppressive energy that had filled the room lifted like a heavy fog. The air felt lighter, more breathable. The force field was gone. Maurice now, I shouted, barely believing it had worked. We didn't waste another second. I rushed toward the child, my heart pounding in my chest. The man turned to face us, his eyes burning with fury, but there was nothing he could do. We were already too far gone. I grabbed her limp hand, pulling her from the table with every ounce of strength I had. She was still unconscious, her small body weak and frail, but she was alive. Maurice, we need to get out of here. Now, I cried. He nodded and pulled a small device from his belt, a tracking beacon that he had managed to get just before we arrived. "We're not leaving without backup," he said, typing in the coordinates as he ran. We moved quickly through the facility, taking advantage of the chaos our escape had caused. The hallway seemed endless, twisting and turning, but Morris led the way, using his knowledge of the building's layout to guide us. But as we neared the exit, I heard footsteps behind us, faint at first, then growing louder. The man wasn't alone. This time, he wasn't just angry. He was coming for us with everything he had. We weren't out of danger yet, but we were closer than ever to freedom. The footsteps behind us grew louder, echoing through the narrow hallway. It was the sound of pursuit, a reminder that no matter how far we had come, we were still being hunted. I glanced over my shoulder, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. The man, whoever he was, wasn't going to let us escape so easily. He wasn't alone anymore. There were more of them. "We have to move faster," I shouted to Morris, my voice laced with urgency. He didn't need any more prompting. His eyes locked on mine, filled with determination, and we broke into a sprint. The child in my arms was still unconscious, her small form limp, but I held her tightly, refusing to let go. I was my responsibility now. Couldn't leave her behind. We rounded corners, pushed through doors, and ran down long metallic corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. The sound of boots pounding on the floor behind us was constant, relentless. They were getting closer. "Maurice, we're almost there," I said, my voice strained. Just a little farther. Ahead I could see a faint light, the exit. It was within reach. I pushed myself harder, urging my legs to go faster, despite the exhaustion that was quickly taking over my body. We burst through a final door, and there it was freedom. Small side door that led to an alleyway outside the facility. The cool night air hit my face, a welcome relief, but I couldn't slow down yet. We were still in danger. We hadn't made it far enough. "Maurice, hurry," I yelled as I pushed the door open with my shoulder, spilling into the alley. The street was empty, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. The sound of footsteps behind us was now joined by the worry of something mechanical. I glanced over my shoulder just in time to see a black SUV screeching around the corner, its headlights blinding us. "We need to move, now," Maurice shouted. I didn't wait for him to say it twice. We started running down the alley, our footsteps muffled by the soft pavement, but the sound of the SUV's engine grew louder, closer. I could hear the tires screeching as it raced toward us. "Maurice, where's the backup?" I gasped. "We're on our own for now," he said, his voice tense. "They're tracking us. Can't outrun them." I looked around frantically, trying to find a way out of this. The alley was a dead end, but there were fire escapes and rooftops above us. My mind raced. We had to climb. We had to get out of their reach before it was too late. "Maurice, the fire escape." I pointed to a ladder leading up to a rooftop just ahead. Without a word, he made a dash for it, and I followed closely behind. We climbed quickly, my arms burning with the effort. Behind us, the SUV screeched to a halt, and I could hear the doors opening. They were getting out, ready to chase us down on foot. We reached the top of the building, gasping for breath, and I looked back down to see the men closing in below. They weren't giving up. They were determined to catch us, no matter what. "We can't stay here," I said, panic creeping into my voice. "They'll have more men. We need to move." Maurice nodded. "There's a building across the street. We can get there. We'll have to keep moving." We didn't waste a second. We crossed the rooftop quickly, making our way toward the edge where a narrow gap separated the two buildings. I could feel the ground shifting beneath my feet, the height making my head spin, but there was no time to think about it. "On three," Morris said, his voice low. 1.2.3. We leaped. It felt like an eternity as we flew through the air, the gap between the buildings wide and daunting. For a moment, I thought we weren't going to make it. But then, with a jolt, I landed hard on the other rooftop, my legs buckling beneath me. I caught myself just in time to grab the edge and pull myself up. Maurice was already there, helping me to my feet. We didn't stop to catch our breath. "Move," Maurice said, pulling me along. We ran through the narrow passage between the two buildings, making our way to a fire exit at the far side. It was our only way out. But as we approached it, I heard voices below us. The men from the facility were already on the ground, spreading out, trying to corner us. Don't stop, Maurice urged, his grip tightening around my arm. We reached the fire exit door and pushed it open. It led us into a dimly lit stairwell. I was breathing hard, my heart racing in my chest. We had barely escaped, but I knew it wasn't over. They would come after us. It wouldn't stop until they had her for whatever twisted purpose they had in mind. But as I glanced down at the child in my arms, I made a silent promise. I would never let them take her again. No matter how many men they sent after us, no matter what obstacles lay ahead, I was going to protect her. We were going to escape. Together. We're not out of this yet, I said, my voice determined. Maurice nodded. I know, but we've got a chance. Let's make it count. With that, we took the stairs 2 at a time, disappearing into the shadows. The stairwell echoed with our rapid footsteps as we descended. The dim light flickering above us, casting long shadows that seemed to follow us down. My heart raced with every step, but it wasn't just fear that gripped me, it was determination. I had promised her I would protect her, and now, more than ever, I understood what that meant. It was a promise I couldn't break. The door at the bottom of the stairs was locked, but Maurice didn't hesitate. He pulled out a small device, a lock-picking tool, and worked quickly, his hands steady, despite the urgency of the situation. We don't have much time, he muttered, as he twisted the tool in the lock, trying to override it. I heard the voices of the men outside, their heavy boots pounding on the pavement, getting closer. They were searching for us. It would be on us any second. Sweat dripped down my face, my pulse pounding in my ears. Morris finally gave a quiet grunt of satisfaction, and the door clicked open. He swung it wide, revealing an alleyway that seemed almost too quiet to empty. For a moment, I was afraid we had just entered another trap. But when I glanced outside, I saw nothing but the shadowy outlines of abandoned buildings and narrow streets stretching out in front of us. We go now, Morris said firmly, pulling me forward. We slipped out into the alley, moving quickly and quietly, sticking to the shadows. Every step felt like a lifetime. I held the child close to my chest, her tiny, fragile form growing heavier in my arms as we moved deeper into the unknown. But I didn't care. I couldn't let her go, so we rounded a corner. I saw a faint light ahead, a car parked at the end of the alley, its engine running quietly. Morris gestured toward it. That's our ride. It's the only way out of here. We hurried toward the car, our footsteps barely making a sound on the wet pavement. But as we reached the vehicle, a figure stepped out from behind it, blocking our path. I froze. The last thing I expected was another threat at this point. The figure was tall, clad in dark clothing, his face obscured by a mask. My stomach churned. Morris, who is that? I whispered, panic rising in my chest. Morris didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his hand reaching for the gun at his belt. Stay back, he ordered, his voice low but firm. The masked figure didn't move, but I could see the faintest glint of recognition in his eyes as he looked from Morris to me. There was something about him, something familiar. And then, without warning, the figure lifted his mask. My heart stopped. Richard. I whispered in disbelief. It was Richard, a former associate of Morris, someone I hadn't seen in years. But there was no time for questions, no time to think. The situation was too dangerous, and we needed to get out. Richard nodded curtly. Maurice, I've got you covered. Get in now. Maurice didn't argue. He opened the car door and slid into the driver's seat. I followed quickly, sliding into the back seat with the child. Richard joined us in the front, his eyes scanning the alley nervously. The engine roared to life and we were off, speeding away from the facility, leaving the chaos behind. But even as we drove through the dark streets, my mind raced. We weren't safe yet. We hadn't escaped. Not completely. How did you find us? I asked Richard, my voice still trembling. How did you know where we were? Richard turned briefly, giving me a quick, tight smile. I had help. Maurice contacted me after he got your message. We've been tracking you, making sure you didn't end up in any more trouble. Maurice, his eyes on the road, didn't say anything. But I could feel the weight of the situation settling in. We weren't just running from a group of men anymore. We were running from a force, much larger, something that had been tracking the child, controlling her, using her for something beyond our comprehension. And we weren't the only ones involved. Someone out there wanted us to fail. Someone out there wanted the child, and they wouldn't stop until they had her back. As we sped through the city streets, Richard glanced in the rearview mirror. We've got a few miles before we can really be safe. They won't stop looking for you. They'll be on us the moment they figure out you're gone." "We'll keep moving," Maurice said, his voice resolute. "But we need a plan. We need to know what they want with her." "We don't have all the answers," Richard said, his voice quieter now. "But we know this much. They've been tracking her for years. They knew she was coming before she even landed." My mind spun with the implications of his words. They knew about her before she even arrived on Earth. How was that possible? What was she really? "We need to get to the safe house," Richard said suddenly, his tone changing. "It's the only place we can regroup and figure out our next move." Maurice nodded. "We'll get there, and we'll keep her safe. We'll keep fighting." I held the child close, trying to push away the fear and doubt gnawing at me. We had made it this far, but the journey was far from over. We were still being hunted, still being watched. But I wasn't going to stop. Not until she was safe. I glanced at the child in my arms. She was starting to stir, her small hands twitching, as if she was waking from a deep sleep. "Thank you," she whispered faintly, her eyes fluttering open. Her voice was soft, but it was enough to send a surge of relief through me. "You're safe now," I whispered back, my voice shaking with emotion. "I won't let them take you again." As we sped away into the night, I knew one thing. This was just the beginning of our fight. They might have come for her, but they had no idea who they were up against. The car sped through the quiet, winding streets. The engine hummed the only sound between us as we traveled further from the danger we had left behind. I held the child tightly in my arms, unable to shake the gnawing fear that still gripped me. Despite our escape, there was no real sense of safety. Not yet. We hadn't outrun the men who were after us. We'd only bought ourselves a little time. As we neared our destination, Richard glanced at us through the rearview mirror. "We're almost there. Stay sharp," he said, his voice low. "The safe house isn't as safe as it used to be. We'll have to keep our heads down and stay quiet." I nodded, my mind racing with questions. The safe house? It sounded like a last resort, a place for those who had no other options. A place where people like us could hide from whatever dangers were chasing us. But I had no illusions. I knew that the people after the child weren't just going to give up. They were organized, they were dangerous, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. Maurice, who had been driving with intense focus, suddenly turned onto a narrow, darkened road. The headlights of the car illuminated the edges of a thick, overgrown fence that surrounded what looked like an abandoned farmhouse. The area was isolated, no streetlights, no neighbors, just a remote, secluded spot perfect for hiding away from the prying eyes of the world. Richard pulled up to the front gate, and with a quick motion, he reached out to press a code into a small keypad next to the gate. There was a soft beep, and the heavy metal gate slowly creaked open. We drove inside and parked in front of the old farmhouse. The structure was weathered and worn, but it was sturdy, built to withstand time, and maybe even a few secrets. This was where we would regroup. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe, at least for now. We all stepped out of the car, and I immediately felt the weight of exhaustion settle over me. We had been running, fighting, and hiding for so long, and though we were momentarily out of immediate danger, the fear and tension had drained every ounce of energy I had left. But I couldn't stop now. I couldn't rest. The child needed me. As we approached the farmhouse, Richard led us through the front door, which creaked ominously as it opened. Inside, the house was dimly lit, with only a few lamps casting faint shadows across the walls. It looked abandoned, like no one had lived here in years, but I could sense that it had been carefully maintained, ready for people like us to take refuge when the world outside became too dangerous. Richard led us down a narrow hallway and into a small, secure room at the back of the house. There a few other people waited, familiar faces, some of them old allies, others strangers. They looked at us with a mixture of curiosity and concern, but no one spoke at first. Everyone knew why we were there. I laid the child gently down on an old, worn couch, feeling a slight sense of relief as she let out a soft sigh and settled into the cushions. She looked fragile, pale, but there was a calmness about her now. Her wide, dark eyes scanned the room before she closed them, slipping back into a peaceful sleep. Maurice moved to the corner of the room, speaking quietly with Richard about their next steps. I could hear snippets of their conversation, but I didn't want to intrude. My focus was entirely on the child. She was safe for now, but I couldn't forget the fear in her eyes when she first woke up in my arms. I couldn't forget that she didn't ask to be caught up in all of this. She had trusted me to protect her. And I would. I sat beside her, reaching out to touch her hand, just to make sure she was still with me. Her small fingers twitched slightly, and a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips, as if she felt my touch in her sleep. I turned to Richard, who was standing by the door watching us. "What now?" I asked quietly. "How long do we stay here?" Richard glanced back at me, his face grim. "Not long. We need to regroup, figure out what they want with her, and then make our move. But they're not going to stop looking for you. And they won't stop looking for her. Then what's the plan?" I asked, my voice sharp with urgency. "What do we do next?" Morris joined us, his face serious. "We need to get her off the grid. The longer she stays here, the higher the risk that they'll find us. We can't stay in one place for too long. We have to keep moving." "But where do we go?" I asked, feeling a surge of panic. "How do we even begin to figure out what they want with her?" Richard shook his head, his expression darkening. "We don't have all the answers, but there's someone who might know. Someone who has been tracking the people after her. They've been trying to get to us for years, but we haven't been able to connect the dots yet. I've got a contact who might be able to help, but getting to them won't be easy." I felt a spark of hope, but it was quickly smothered by the reality of what we were up against. "Do you trust this contact?" I asked. Richard hesitated before answering. "I don't know. But right now, they're our best chance." I looked down at the child, still sleeping soundly on the couch, unaware of the dangers that still lurked just outside. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, but I knew one thing for sure. I would protect her, no matter the cost, no matter what came next. "This isn't over," I said quietly, my voice filled with determination. "We'll figure it out. We'll stop them." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I finally allowed myself to believe that we might actually have a chance to get through this together. The night was long. Stillness of the safe house made it feel like time had slowed down. It's like we were stuck in a moment of suspended reality, unable to escape the shadows that loomed over us. The child was still sleeping, her small body curled up on the couch, her breathing slow and steady. I stayed by her side, watching over her, keeping my mind focused on the one thing that mattered, her safety. But the weight of the situation, the fact that we had just barely escaped the facility, that we were still being hunted, was always there, just beneath the surface. I couldn't shake the thought that we weren't safe, that at any moment, someone could come crashing through that door, determined to take her back. I wasn't sure how much time we had before they found us again. I glanced at Richard and Morris, who were talking quietly in the corner of the room. They had been discussing their next move, what to do now that we had a safe place to regroup. But I knew that no matter how much we planned, we would always be running. We could never let our guard down. It wasn't until the child stirred in her sleep that I was brought back to reality, shifted slightly, her eyes fluttering open, and for a moment she seemed confused, lost. She looked around the room, her gaze settling on me. "Are we safe?" she whispered, her voice soft, almost childlike in its innocence. I smiled at her, trying to reassure her, though I felt anything but calm. "Yes," I said gently. "We're safe for now." She nodded slowly, but there was a look of uncertainty in her eyes that I couldn't ignore. "Are they coming for me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I hesitated. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her that everything was going to be okay, that we were finally free of the danger, but deep down, I knew the truth. We hadn't escaped yet. They were still out there, still searching for her. "They might," I said quietly, "but we won't let them take you. I won't let them." She looked up at me, her eyes full of something deeper than fear, something I couldn't place. "I don't want to be a weapon," she whispered, almost to herself. My heart broke at the words. A child should ever have to feel like they were born to be something like that, something to be used, controlled, and discarded. I didn't know what to say. The man at the facility had told me that she was more than just a child, that she was part of something much bigger, something that I couldn't understand. A weapon, a key to something unknown. But that wasn't who she was to me. She was my family, a child who had been thrown into a situation she didn't ask for. and I would do everything in my power to protect her from whatever they had planned for her. I'm not going to let them turn you into anything you're not, I promised, my voice steady. You're not a weapon. You're a person. You matter. She looked up at me, her small face softening, as though she was searching for something in my words. She didn't speak again, but I could see the quiet relief in her eyes. It was then that I heard Richard's voice, low and serious, cutting through the silence. I think it's time we get some answers, he said, turning toward me. I have a contact who might be able to help us figure out what's really going on, but getting to him won't be easy. We need to move fast. I stood up, my muscles aching from the tension of the past few days. Who's this contact? I asked, my curiosity piqued. And why should we trust them? Richard met my gaze. They've been tracking the people who've been after you, after her. They know things that could change everything. Morris, who had been standing off to the side, nodded. They'd been in the shadows, watching for years. They're the ones who can help us take down whoever's behind this, but we need to be careful. If they know we're coming, we could be walking right into another trap. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Another trap. It seemed like every time we thought we were safe, every time we got close to the truth, we were thrust back into danger. But we had no choice. We couldn't keep running forever. I'll go with you, I said, determination filling my voice. I'm not leaving her side. Richard nodded. Good. We need to move quickly before they figure out we're here. I turned to the child, who was now sitting up on the couch watching us with wide eyes. It was so small, so fragile, yet I could see something in her strength that I hadn't noticed before. A quiet resilience. She might not have asked for any of this, but she was ready to fight. And so was I. We're going to get through this, I whispered to her. I won't let them take you. She nodded, her expression serious. She might have been scared, but she trusted me, and that was enough. The plan was simple. Get to the contact, learn what they knew, and figure out who was really behind the people who had been hunting us. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't be quick, but it was our only shot at finally understanding what they wanted with her and how to stop them. Richard led the way as we moved quickly through the back of the house, heading toward a small, unmarked van parked in the alley. As we made our way to the vehicle, I looked back at the farmhouse, taking a final, lingering glance at the place we had been hiding. We weren't safe here. We wouldn't be safe anywhere until we got the answers we needed. This time, we were going to find them. We were going to take control of this story, her story, and we weren't going to let anyone rewrite it for her. As we drove away into the night, the child slept once more, resting against my shoulder. We had no idea what awaited us next. But for the first time in days, I allowed myself to believe that we might just have a chance. The ride to the contact's location was tense. The van's tires hummed softly against the road, the only sound breaking the stillness. I kept my eyes fixed ahead, trying to suppress the ever-growing unease in my chest. It wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about uncovering the truth about why they were after her, why they had been tracking us, and what her role in all of this really was. I glanced at the child, who was still asleep, her small body curled up against me. Despite the chaos we had been through, despite everything that had happened to her, she looked peaceful. It was as if for a few moments, she could forget the reality that she was, indeed, just a child. She was a pawn in someone's larger, more dangerous game. Richard drove in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Morris sat next to him, his eyes scanning the road ahead. I knew neither of them felt safe. None of us did. After what felt like an eternity, Richard slowed the van and turned onto an even narrower street, barely visible in the dim light. We passed a few houses that looked long abandoned, their windows boarded up, their lawns overgrown with weeds. The further we went, the more the neighborhood seemed to dissolve into nothingness, as if we were driving deeper into the outskirts of some forgotten place. Finally, Richard stopped in front of a dilapidated building that looked like it had been there for decades. The outside was covered in grime, with peeling paint and cracked windows. It looked like something out of a ghost town. "This is it," Richard said, turning to us. "Stay close. We don't know who else is here, and we don't know how long we have before someone figures out we are recoming." I nodded, feeling the weight of the situation settle deeper into my bones. This was it. We had no other choice but to trust this contact, whoever they were. We climbed out of the van and approached the building, keeping to the shadows as much as possible. Richard led the way, his footsteps quick but deliberate. The door to the building creaked open when he pushed it, revealing a dark, empty hallway. The air was thick with dust and the smell of stale wood, and for a moment, I wondered if this place had even been inhabited recently. As we stepped inside, I noticed the subtle signs of life-faint light seeping from a doorway at the far end. The faintest hum of machines from deeper within the building. It felt like we were walking into something that shouldn't exist, into a place where the rules of the world didn't apply. Richard stopped in front of the door at the end of the hallway and knocked twice sharp, deliberate raps. "Who's there?" a voice called from the other side. It was low and guarded, with a hint of suspicion. "It's me," Richard replied simply. "We've got company." There was a long pause before the sound of locks turning echoed through the door. It opened slowly, revealing a man standing in the doorway, his face partially obscured by shadows. His eyes were sharp, scanning us with an intensity that made me feel like he could see straight through me. "You made it," he said, his voice gravelly. "But the real question is, why should I help you?" Richard stepped forward, nodding toward the child. "You know why we're here? We need answers." The man's eyes flickered to the child, then back to Richard. "Answers?" He shook his head. "You're not the first to ask for those, but you might be the last." My breath caught in my throat. The man's cryptic words unsettled me, but I wasn't about to back down now. "What does that mean?" I asked, stepping forward. "What do you know about her?" The man looked me up and down, his gaze lingering on the child. "You're in deep, aren't you?" He sighed heavily and stepped aside, motioning for us to enter. Come in. It's not safe out here." We filed inside, the door clicking shut behind us. The room we entered was dimly lit, filled with a variety of equipment I didn't recognize. Old monitors, servers, and papers scattered across desks. It looked like a command center, or perhaps a hidden lab. This wasn't just a safe house, it was a place of secrets. The man gestured to a worn couch against one wall. "We've got a lot to discuss." We sat, and for the first time, I felt a sense of foreboding. We're about to uncover something that could change everything, something that would explain why they were hunting the child, why they needed her, and what role I played in all of this. The man finally spoke again, his voice lower this time, more serious. "Her arrival here on Earth was no accident. She's not just a child. She's part of a project that goes back decades, a project that has been hidden in the shadows, controlled by people you've never heard of. People who have known about her kind, long before she arrived." I felt my stomach tighten. My breath caught in my throat. "She's not human," the man continued. "And she's not alone. There are others, scattered across the globe. But she's different, more important than the rest." I felt a rush of panic rise in my chest. "What do you mean, different?" The man looked at me, his gaze piercing. "She's the key to something far bigger than any of us realize. A key to power, control, and knowledge that could change the world. They've been searching for her, tracking her since she landed here. And now, they want to use her. But the question is, who will get to her first? Them, or us?" The weight of his words hit me like a sledgehammer. She wasn't just a child. She was a weapon. A key to something that could alter the course of humanity. And I had no idea what the world would look like once they got what they wanted. The man's words echoed in my mind, the reality of what he said sinking in like a cold stone. The child, my daughter, wasn't just a casualty in a war between powerful forces. She was the prize, the key to something much larger, much more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. I had spent so much time thinking I was just protecting a lost child, but now I realized that I was in the middle of something far darker. I looked down at her, still sleeping peacefully on the couch, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. She had no idea that her mere existence was the reason so many were willing to go to extremes to find her. "We've been following her for years," the man continued, his voice cutting through my thoughts. "We've tracked every movement, every anomaly. The project she's part of, it's classified. It's been hidden in the shadows, under layers of secrecy. The organization behind it is vast, connected to governments, corporations, and military powers. They all want what she represents." "Who are they?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. "Who's behind all of this?" The man paused, his eyes narrowing as if weighing whether to answer. Finally he spoke, his voice low. They call themselves the Syndicate, shadow organization that's existed for decades, manipulating everything from behind the scenes. They have resources, connections enough to control nations if they wanted to, and they're not just after the child. They want control over her abilities. They want to use her for their own purposes. I felt a chill run down my spine. The Syndicate sounded like something out of a conspiracy theory. But I knew from the fear and determination in the man's eyes that it was real. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they had their sights set on her. What abilities? I asked, trying to steady my voice. What does she have that they want so badly? The man looked at the child again, then back at me. You've seen it, haven't you? Her energy? The way she's able to survive things that no human could? The Syndicate has been experimenting with advanced alien technology for years, trying to harness it for their own gain. But your daughter, she's not just a subject in their experiments. She is the experiment. My heart pounded as the pieces slowly started to fall into place. The glowing energy that had surrounded her when she first arrived, the way she had survived the crash, and the way she seemed to heal faster than any human should, all of it made sense now. But she's not just a weapon, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. She's a person. She has a right to choose her own future. The man's expression softened for a moment. I know. I'm not saying she isn't human. But the reality is, they won't care. They've already started their plans. If they get their hands on her, they'll stop at nothing to use her to further their control. I looked at the child again, my heart aching for her. I couldn't let them take her. I couldn't let them turn her into a tool, a weapon to be used for their own gain. We can't let them win, I said, my voice filled with newfound determination. We have to stop them. Richard, who had been quietly observing the conversation, spoke up. We're not just dealing with a few rogue agents here. The Syndicate is connected to so many people, so many organizations. They have resources we can't even imagine. We've been fighting them in the shadows for years, and we've lost more than we've won. But we have something they don't, I said, my mind racing. We have her. We have the key. And we're not going to let them control her. The man whose name I still didn't know looked at me, studying me carefully. You're right. We've been trying to keep her hidden, to protect her. But now that you've brought her here, you've made her a target. We'll have to move fast. The Syndicate won't waste time now that they know she's alive. I looked at the child one more time. What's the plan? I asked. My voice steadied despite the rising panic in my chest. Richard nodded, stepping forward. First, we need to get her somewhere safe. We can't risk staying here too long. The Syndicate will trace us soon, and when they do, they won't stop. We need to make contact with the people who've been working against them, our allies. We'll figure out how to take them down from the inside. And then what? I asked, how do we fight an organization that has so much power? We fight smart, Richard replied, his eyes burning with resolve. We find their weaknesses, and we expose them. We take down their infrastructure, one piece at a time. We get the information we need, and we use it against them. And most importantly, we protect her. She's the key to ending this. I felt a surge of hope at his words. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time since all of this started, I felt like we had a chance. The man who had led us here stepped forward, his face hardening. We're going to need more than just your resolve to win this fight. We need allies, need people who've been working against the Syndicate for years, and I know where to find them. Where? I asked, eager to take the next step. He paused, as if considering the weight of his words. There's a network of people in the shadows underground, hidden from prying eyes. They've been waiting for someone to rise up against the Syndicate. I can take you to them. But once we do, there's no turning back. The Syndicate will come for us all. I looked at the child again, her peaceful face now a symbol of everything we were fighting for. We've already turned back, I said, my voice filled with conviction. We're not stopping now. The man nodded, stepping toward the door. Then let's go. We've got a war to win. As we moved toward the next chapter of our journey, I knew one thing for sure. We were no longer just running from the past. We were fighting for the future. And we weren't going to stop until we had reclaimed it. We left the safe house with more questions than answers, but at least now we had a direction. The journey ahead would be treacherous, dangerous in ways we couldn't predict. But the man who had been guiding us, still a stranger in many ways, promised that we had allies out, They're people who had been silently resisting the syndicate for years. People who could help us take them down. As we drove through the night, the child slept peacefully in the back of the van, her tiny form curled up, trusting me as her protector. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe we might actually have a chance at freedom. But the truth loomed over me like a storm cloud, reminding me that the fight ahead wouldn't be easy. The man who finally introduced himself as Elias gave us as much information as he could, without giving away too much. He knew where the syndicate's weaknesses were, how to exploit their flaws. But even he wasn't sure where all the pieces fit together. The syndicate was a vast, shadowy organization, with hands in everything from global governments to tech industries. They operated in the dark, and they controlled everything from behind the scenes. They've been building their empire for decades, Elias said, his voice low as we drove through the dark roads, the headlights casting eerie shadows over the landscape. And they've had your daughter, under surveillance for nearly as long. She's not just part of a project. She's a symbol to them, a way to control power. His words struck me like a hammer, but I couldn't let myself think about it for too long. I had to focus on the next step. "So where are we going now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. Elias glanced at me, his face grim. "There's an old facility in the mountains. It's a safe house, but it's more than that. It's a stronghold. A place where the resistance has been gathering information, hiding people, and planning their next moves. If we're going to stand a chance, we need to connect with them. We need their resources." I nodded, my mind already racing ahead. "And once we're there, what then?" "We form an alliance," Elias replied, his voice unwavering. "We work with them to take down the syndicate from the inside. We use their power, their reach. We expose the truth about what they've been doing with people like your daughter." I glanced back at the child, still sleeping in the back. I couldn't let my mind wander too far. I couldn't let myself think about the future. We had to get there first. I had to survive long enough to make our move. The road stretched out before us, the headlights illuminating a world that seemed far too quiet, far too still for the chaos we had left behind. But I knew it wouldn't last. We weren't just running from the syndicate. We were hunting them now. We're hunting the people who had torn apart our lives, who had turned a child into a weapon, who had pulled us into their fight for control. And now, the fight had come to us. We arrived at the facility just before dawn, the first rays of light breaking over the horizon. The building itself was nothing like I'd expected. It was hidden in the mountains, surrounded by thick trees and rocky terrain. From the outside, it looked like a relic from a bygone-era forgotten military outpost, abandoned by time. But inside, it was alive with activity. People moved in and out of rooms, working at computers, speaking in hushed tones. "This is where it begins," Elias said as we stepped out of the van, his gaze scanning the area with practiced vigilance. "Stay close and keep your head down. These people are good, but they don't trust easily. If we want to gain their trust, we need to prove we're serious." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest as I looked around. There was no turning back now. We'd come this far, and we couldn't afford to make a wrong move. Every decision, every step counted. Inside, the facility was far more sophisticated than I had imagined. It wasn't just a safe house. It was a hub for resistance fighters, a place where people from all walks of life had come together to fight the syndicate. Some were former soldiers, others were scientists and tech experts. But all of them shared the same goal: to destroy the power that the syndicate had built over the years. Elias led us through the hallways, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of the history here. It was a place where the oppressed had come to fight back, a place where survival meant knowing who to trust and who to fear. We were in the heart of the storm now. We were introduced to the leader of the resistance, a woman named Sarah, who had a presence that was both commanding and comforting. She was older than me, with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a quiet authority that immediately put me at ease. Elias didn't waste any time. "Sarah, this is the woman I told you about," he said. "She's the one who's been protecting the child. The one who's been running from the syndicate." Sarah looked at me, her eyes softening as they moved from my face to the child in my arms. "I've heard about you," she said quietly, "and about her. You've been through a lot, but you're not alone anymore. We'll protect you here." I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. It felt like we had been fighting for so long, running so far, but here finally there was a semblance of peace. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like we might actually have a chance. Sarah glanced at the child, then back at me. But you need to understand, the syndicate won't stop. They'll come for her. And when they do, we'll be ready. I nodded, the weight of her words heavy in the air. The truth was clear. Now we weren't just fighting for survival. We were fighting for the future of the world. For the future of the child, who had become my family. And I would never stop fighting for her. We're ready, I said, my voice firm. Let's take them down. We spent the next few days inside the facility, adjusting to our new reality. The resistance, as Sarah had called it, wasn't just a place to hide. It was a well-oiled machine, ready for the fight ahead. I watched as the fighters and strategists moved through the building, preparing for their next moves. Everyone seemed to be operating with a singular focus stake down the syndicate, no matter the cost. Sarah kept us busy, showing us the ins and outs of the facility. While I couldn't make sense of most of the technology, I began to understand the gravity of what we were involved in. The people here weren't just survivors, they were warriors, people who had lost everything and found something worth fighting for. And they were willing to give everything to stop the syndicate from controlling the world. I kept my distance at first, unsure of who to trust, but as time passed, I began to feel a connection to the people here. They understood what it meant to fight for something greater than themselves. And though we had been thrown together by circumstance, we were united by a common cause. The child, whom I had come to think of as my daughter, had become somewhat of a symbol to everyone here. Her very existence was the reason we were all in this fight, and I could see how that weighed on her. She was still small, still vulnerable, but there was something in her that had shifted. She was no longer the frightened girl who had been caught in a crash. She was becoming something more, something stronger. One evening, after a long day of preparations, Sarah called me into a small, dimly lit room. The child was sleeping in the corner of the room, tucked under a blanket, her breathing slow and steady. Sarah motioned for me to sit down, and I did, feeling the tension in the air. "We're getting closer," she said, her voice low. "But this is only the beginning. We need more information, more allies, and more time. The syndicate is moving faster than we thought. They've already started activating their operatives around the world. And we've had reports that they're closing in on our location." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "So we're running out of time," yes, Sarah replied, her gaze never leaving mine. "And the child is the key. They'll do anything to get their hands on her. We have to move quickly if we want to protect Heron, stop them from using her to control everything." The weight of her words settled heavily on my shoulders. I had promised to protect her, to keep her safe from everything, but it seemed like the odds were against us. Every step we took forward was met with resistance from the shadows. The syndicate was everywhere, and we were just a small group of people fighting back. "How do we stop them?" I asked, my voice filled with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her eyes thoughtful. "We expose them, we gather evidence, and we make their actions public. The syndicate has hidden behind the scenes for too long. They control everything from the shadows, but if we shine a light on their operations, if we can make the world see what they've been doing, it might be enough to bring them down." I nodded, absorbing her words. It seemed like such a simple plan, but I knew it would be anything but easy. The syndicate was a massive organization, and they had resources at their disposal that we couldn't even begin to fathom. "But we need her," Sarah continued, her gaze drifting to the child. "We need her abilities to gain access to their systems, to break through the firewalls and encryption that protect their secrets. She's the only one who can help us do that." I felt a pang in my chest. The child wasn't just a victim in all of this, she was a tool, a key to unlocking the syndicate's darkest secrets. And yet, even knowing that I couldn't bring myself to see her as anything less than the girl I had promised to protect. She was more than just a weapon. She was family. "She doesn't deserve this," I said quietly, my voice heavy with emotion. Sarah's eyes softened. "No, she doesn't. But she's the only one who can help us win. And if we're going to protect her, if we're going to stop the syndicate, we need to use every resource we have." I stood up, the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. "We're ready," I said, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside me. "We'll do whatever it takes." Sarah gave me a small, knowing smile. "I knew you would. but we need to act fast. The syndicate won't wait for us to make our move. The next few days were a blur of activity. We worked around the clock, gathering intel, making plans, and preparing for the mission ahead. The resistance fighters trained hard, honing their skills in preparation for the inevitable confrontation. And I, along with Maurice and Richard, worked on getting the child ready to face whatever lay ahead. As I spent more time with her, I began to notice changes, subtle at first, but undeniable. She was becoming more aware of her surroundings, more focused, and even more curious. She asked questions about everything's the world, the resistance, the fight ahead, and I could see the fire in her eyes. She was beginning to understand her role in all of this, and though I could see the weight it placed on her, there was a quiet strength in her that hadn't been there before. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in the quiet room, staring at the maps and documents scattered across the table. I had never thought I would be here fighting a battle I didn't understand, against an enemy I couldn't see. But the child, the girl who had come into my life so unexpectedly, had become my purpose. I couldn't let them take her. I couldn't let them win. As I stood up and turned toward the child, who had woken up and was sitting quietly on the couch, I felt a sense of resolve wash over me. Whatever the future held, I was ready for her. For us. We'll stop them, I whispered to her, my voice filled with certainty. Together. And as she looked up at me, her eyes filled with the trust that had always been there, I knew she believed it too. The storm was coming, but we were ready. We would fight to the very end. The days blurred into one another as we prepared for the final stage of our plan. The resistance fighters were ready, armed with whatever weapons, technology, and information we could scrounge together. We had made allies, gathered intelligence, and mapped out every move we would need to make. But even with all that preparation, there was one thing none of us could ignore: the child. She was the center of it all. The reason we had come this far, the reason we were risking everything. I found myself spending more time with her, talking to her, trying to comfort her in whatever small ways I could. She was different, now stronger, more aware. The weight of the role she had been forced into was beginning to settle on her small shoulders. But even through all the fear and uncertainty, there was a spark in her eyes, a determination. She wasn't just a pawn in a war she didn't choose. She was a fighter in her own right. "You'll be okay," I said softly one night, as I sat beside her in the quiet room. The hum of the facility's machinery in the background. "We're going to make sure you're okay. We won't let them take you." She looked up at me, her expression more serious than I'd ever seen. "I know, I trust you." Those words hit me harder than anything. That trust, that bond we had formed over the past weeks, was something I would fight for until my last breath. She was more than just a child to me now. She was my family, and no one was going to tear us apart. But as the days ticked by, the tension in the air grew thicker. The resistance had set its plan in motion. We had infiltrated some of the syndicate's networks, found weak points, and identified key figures in their organization. But we knew that exposing the syndicate's operations wouldn't be enough. They were too powerful, too ingrained in the fabric of society, to simply be taken down with a few well-placed blows. "We need to take out the core," Elias had said, his voice heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. "We need to go to their headquarters, the heart of the syndicate. That's where the real power lies." It sounded like suicide, but there was no other option. If we didn't take that step, the syndicate would always be lurking in the shadows, always pulling the strings. We had to go straight to the source. The night before we were set to leave, I found myself standing in front of the small window that overlooked the Resistance's camp. The facility was quiet, but I could feel the pulse of urgency, the steady heartbeat of everyone preparing for what was about to come. They knew the risks. We all knew the risks.
Ow.
But we couldn't stop now. We had come too far. "Maurice," I said, turning to him as he stepped into the room behind me. "Are we ready?" He nodded, his face hard but determined, as ready as we'll ever be. "The syndicate is waiting for us, but they won't know what hit them." I exhaled, glancing back at the child, who was now sitting on the couch, her eyes watching us closely. "I don't want her to get hurt. I don't want anyone to get hurt." Morris followed my gaze, his expression softening. "We're doing this to protect her. We're doing this so she has a future. She has a chance at a life. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about hope. It was about giving her a chance to choose her future. I turned back to the child, walking over to her slowly. She looked up at me, her small face filled with quiet understanding. She didn't speak, but the look in her eyes said everything. She knew what was coming. She knew the stakes. "You don't have to do this," I whispered, kneeling in front of her. "You don't have to be part of this fight." Her eyes softened, and she shook her head. "I have to," she said quietly, her voice filled with the kind of determination I had only seen in warriors. "I'm part of this now. I have to fight for myself. For you, for everyone." I reached out and took her hand, my heart swelling with pride and fear. "I'll always protect you. I'll never let you go." She nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I know you will." As the night wore on, the resistance fighters gathered in the main hall, preparing for the mission that would change everything. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. But we had something the Syndicate didn't. We had each other, the strength of our conviction. "We move at dawn," Sarah announced, as she stood before the group. Her voice calm but filled with the power of someone who had nothing left to lose. "This is our chance. We do it right, and we take them down. We show them what happens when they mess with the wrong people." The room erupted in applause, a collective surge of energy that was as much about hope as it was about defiance. I could feel it in my bones, the weight of the moment. This was it, the final push. As we gathered our gear, I pulled the child close to me one last time, holding her tight in my arms. "Are you ready?" I asked softly. "Lee." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with the same quiet resolve I had seen in Sarah and the rest of the resistance. "I'm ready." And in that moment, I knew we had everything we needed. We had each other. We had hope. We were going to win. Tomorrow, we would take the fight to the Syndicate. Tomorrow, everything changed. The crack of dawn barely broke the stillness of the morning before the resistance fighters began to mobilize. The air was heavy with the anticipation of what was to come. We gathered in the central hall of the facility, the silence between us speaking louder than any words could. Every face in the room was set with determination. Some wore expressions of quiet resolve, others of fierce resolve, but all shared the same goal: to bring down the Syndicate. Sarah stood in front of the group, her voice cutting through the tension. "This is it. We go in fast, we hit hard, and we don't look back. We know where they're weakest. We know what we need to do. The child's safety is our priority. Get in, get her to safety, and take them down. No mercy." I stood at the back of the room, my eyes locked on the child, who was sitting beside me, her gaze steady. I could see the quiet strength in her. She had come so far from the frightened girl who had crashed to earth to the warrior she was becoming now. I knew she was ready for whatever lay ahead. "You ready?" I asked softly, kneeling down in front of her. She looked up at me, her eyes clear and filled with purpose. "I'm ready," she said simply, her voice calm and unwavering. It was time. I stood up, glancing around at the team. There were no more questions, no more doubts. Yes. We had come this far, and we couldn't afford to lose now. The Syndicate was a shadow in the world's corner, controlling things from the shadows, pulling the strings of power. But today, we would pull them out into the light. The operation was a well-oiled machine. We split into smaller units, each with a specific target in mind. Some would take on the Syndicate's guards, others would disable their systems, and a small team, including Maurice. Richard and I would head straight for the heart of the operation, the Syndicate's command center. We were ready. But as we moved toward the entrance, a nagging thought lingered in my mind: this could be a one-way trip. We weren't going to just disrupt the Syndicate's operation, we were going to tear it down. That meant they would come at us with everything they had. Morris led the way, his calm demeanor a reassuring constant. "Stay close. Stay quiet. Hit them fast and clean. No time for mistakes." We moved like shadows, gliding through the darkened streets until we reached the compound where the Syndicate was hiding. The compound was a fortress stall, imposing and heavily guarded, but we knew its weaknesses. The Syndicate had grown too confident, too comfortable in their position of power. They had underestimated us. Our plan was simple: get in, neutralize the guards, and find the heart of the operation. But as we approached the compound, things didn't go as planned. The first guard we encountered barely had time to react before we silenced him. But then another alarm. The syndicate had been alerted. "Move, move," Morris shouted. "They know we're here." We burst through the gates, fighting our way through the outer defenses. The sounds of gunfire rang out around us, the echoes of chaos reverberating through the compound. It was happening. We were in the thick of it now. "Where are they holding her?" I yelled, scanning the area for any sign of the child's location. Richard, who had been at the rear with our backup team, pointed to a building at the far end of the compound. "In there, at the command center. That's where they're keeping her." I didn't need to hear more. I ran toward the building, my heart pounding in my chest, my thoughts focused on one thing: getting her out. The entrance was guarded, but Maurice and Richard took down the guards in swift, precise moves. We stormed the door, taking the interior by surprise. The chaos of battle was everywhere, guards scrambling to react, alarms blaring in the distance. But we had the element of surprise on our side. We reached the heart of the building where the control room was located. Inside, dozens of monitors flickered with data, showing surveillance of the compound, the streets outside, and even satellite feeds. But what caught my attention wasn't the equipment, it was the child. She was sitting in a small metal chair, surrounded by strange machinery that hummed with energy. Her eyes were closed and she appeared unconscious. But I could see the faintest flicker of light around her, like an energy pulse that was too strong to ignore. "Get her out now," shouted to Morris and Richard. I rushed to her side, my hands trembling as I unhooked the machines that surrounded her. The child stirred, her eyes opening slowly. When she saw me, her expression softened, relief flooding her face. "You came for me," she whispered, her voice weak but full of trust. I helped her to her feet, my heart swelling with both fear and pride. "I promised you I would never leave you," I whispered, lifting her into my arms. "We're getting out of here." But as I turned to leave, the door slammed shut and a voice rang out from behind us. "You're not going anywhere." The syndicate's leader, finally making his appearance, stepped into the room, flanked by his most loyal agents. He was tall, imposing, and his cold, calculating eyes locked onto me with a look of disdain. "You've interfered long enough," he sneered. "You think you can destroy everything I've built? You're nothing but a fool?" I stood tall, holding the child protectively. "You're the fool. You've made one mistake after another, and now it's over." The leader smiled darkly. "You think you've won? You haven't even begun to understand what she is, what she can do. You're just pawns in a game far bigger than you can comprehend." I could feel the child stir in my arms, her energy pulsing, as if in response to the leader's words. She was more than just a weapon. She was more than anyone had realized. And in that moment, I knew that we weren't just going to escape, we were going to finish this. "We're not pawns," I said, my voice steady. "We're done playing your game." With that, the final battle began, the fight for her future. The fight to destroy the syndicate and everything they stood for. And we wouldn't stop until it was over. The room seemed to close in around us as the syndicate leader's smug smile remained fixed on his face. The sound of the child's energy pulsing in my arms seemed to grow louder, resonating in the space between us, as if she were silently challenging him, ready to face whatever lay ahead. I could feel the power within her, a quiet force that had been building since she arrived more than I had ever realized. The leader's eyes flicked to her, then back to me, a spark of recognition flashing in his gaze. He must have known the potential she held, the kind of weapon she could be in the wrong hands. "You don't understand," he said, stepping forward. "She's not what you think. You think you're protecting her, but you're just delaying the inevitable. She belongs to us. She always has." I tightened my grip on her, my heart racing. "No," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the tension. "She doesn't belong to anyone. It's her own person, and I'll die before I let you take her." The leader's expression darkened. "You think you've won? You've only uncovered a fraction of the truth. Syndicate is everywhere, at the highest levels of government, in corporations, in the very systems you rely on. You can't defeat us. You've already won." He wasn't wrong. The syndicate's influence was vast, its reach deep into every facet of society. But in that moment, I didn't care about the extent of their power. I only cared about the child in my arms, the promise I made to her, and the fight we had ahead. "We'll see about that," I said, more to myself than to him. The room erupted in movement as the syndicate's agents, who had been waiting in the shadows, began to close in on us. There were too many of them, well-trained, well-armed. and I wasn't about to let that stop us. "Maurice!" I shouted. Maurice, who had been by my side the entire time, snapped into action. With Richard at his side, they quickly began returning fire, taking down agents with precision. The air was thick with gunfire and the acrid smell of smoke as we fought to get out of this hellhole. The leader stepped back, his face twisted in both anger and amusement. "You're wasting your time. It's already too late." But it wasn't too late, not yet. We had come this far, and we weren't about to let the Syndicate win. We weren't just fighting for the child's future anymore. We were fighting for the future of everyone they had manipulated, everyone they had controlled. "Get to the control room," Sarah shouted over the noise, as she and the resistance members stormed in behind us. "We need to shut down their systems before they can send reinforcements." Without a second thought, we pushed forward, cutting our way through the chaos. Every step brought us closer to the heart of the Syndicate's operation, the place where they held the reins of power. I could feel the child's energy pulsing stronger now, as if responding to the violence around us. I knew we were running out of time. We reached the control room, a large, sterile space filled with monitors, keyboards, and flashing lights. At the center of the room was a massive interactive map, showing the Syndicate's global operations in real time. "Get to the main console," Sarah yelled, as we moved in, her voice sharp and commanding. I didn't hesitate. I ran to the nearest terminal, punching in commands and trying to bypass the encryption. But the leader wasn't far behind. "You think you've won?" he sneered, standing in the doorway. "You think you can stop this with a few keystrokes? This is bigger than you can imagine. We'll never be able to shut it down. It's too embedded. The Syndicate is everywhere." I didn't look at him. My focus was entirely on the screen, my fingers flying over the keyboard. "I don't need to shut it all down. I just need to take you down." With a few more commands, I triggered a shutdown sequence that began to disable the Syndicate systems. The lights flickered briefly as alarms blared throughout the building. "What did you do?" the leader hissed. "You have no idea what you've unleashed. It's too late for all of you." I turned to face him, my heart steady now. "We'll see about that." Suddenly, the building shook with a deafening roar. Systems were failing, the Syndicate's control slipping away as their infrastructure crumbled. But it wasn't just the facility that was falling apart. It was their entire operation. The child, still in my arms, emitted a brilliant pulse of energy. The force was so powerful it reverberated through the room, knocking the leader off his feet and sending the Syndicate agents scrambling for cover. The room around us shimmered with the residual energy. I looked down at her, my heart swelling with pride. She had done it. She had taken the fight to them in a way none of us could have anticipated, but we weren't finished yet. The battle was far from over. "We're not done," Maurice said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "The Syndicate will fight back, but now we've taken their power. It's time to finish this." I nodded, my eyes locked on the child, who now stood with a quiet but fierce determination in her eyes. "Let's make sure they never come after us again," with the facility crumbling around us. We made our way out, every step heavy with the knowledge that the world was changing. The Syndicate's grip was loosening, but their war wasn't over, neither was ours. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were on the right side of the fight. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. We weren't just running anymore. We were leading the charge. And together, we would finish what we started. The world outside the Syndicate's crumbling stronghold was a blur of lights and noise as we made our way through the chaos. The building behind us was collapsing under the weight of its own secrets, its walls cracking and buckling as the systems we had triggered began to dismantle everything the Syndicate had built. The child, my daughter, walked beside me, her small hand firmly grasping mine. She was different now. Her quiet strength radiated from her in a way I had never seen before. It wasn't just the power she possessed, the strange energy that had been growing within her. It was something deeper, something that spoke of resilience, of survival. We moved quickly through the streets, our mission far from over. The sounds of distant gunfire and sirens reminded us that this wasn't just another escape. This was the beginning of a larger war. The Syndicate was far-reaching, and though we had struck a devastating blow, they weren't going to let us walk away unscathed. They would come after us with everything they had. "We need to keep moving," Mars said, his voice steady, despite the danger surrounding us. "They'll know we've breached their core. We can't stay in one place too long." I nodded, my gaze never leaving the child. She was walking with purpose now, her eyes scanning the surroundings like a soldier on a mission. There was no fear in her anymore. She had accepted her role in this fight, and so had I. We reached a secluded alley, the last safe haven before we would have to confront what was next. The rest of the resistance had split off, creating diversions, taking down more syndicate outposts, while we were heading toward the final piece of our plan. We couldn't afford to be caught now, not after everything we had sacrificed to get this far. Sarah, who had been silent for most of the journey, finally spoke. We've done more than most could have dreamed of. The syndicate will retaliate, and when they do, they'll come after you. After her. I turned to her, my thoughts still focused on the child. How do we finish this? Sarah looked at the child, her expression softening. Can't let her become their weapon. We need to ensure she's free, not just from the syndicate's control, but from anyone who wants to use her for their own gain. We find the heart of their network, and we expose it. We tear it down, piece by piece. I met her eyes, a burning determination filling me. We will. I won't stop until they're finished. The tension in the air was palpable, and I could see the fight in Sarah's eyes. The same resolve I had seen in all the resistance members. But there was a new element now, urgency to protect the child. The knowledge that if we didn't act soon, we would lose everything. Richard, who had been scanning the streets, turned to us. We've got company, he said, his voice sharp. Get ready. I didn't need to ask who it was. The syndicate wasn't going to let us leave unscathed. The streets erupted in chaos as we heard the sound of vehicles approaching, their headlights cutting through the darkness like predators stalking their prey. Go! Morris shouted, pulling the child close to him. I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran, my legs pumping with adrenaline, my heart racing as I focused on one thing: keeping her safe, keeping her with us. We ducked into a nearby building, a warehouse long abandoned, its broken windows letting in the moonlight. We were cornered, but not out of options. The syndicate's agents were closing in, their footsteps echoing louder with every passing second. Morris stood at the door, his back to us. We'll hold them off. You get to the control room, he said, his voice filled with command. The rest of the resistance is waiting. This is our last chance to finish them off. I nodded, my eyes hard with resolve. The child was watching me, her expression unreadable, but I could see the quiet strength she had found in herself. Stay close, I told her softly, taking her hand again as we moved deeper into the building. We reached a series of corridors, each one leading us further into the heart of the building. The control room was just ahead, and I could feel the tension building in the pit of my stomach. This was it. This was where the syndicate's power was held. If we could break this, we would have the leverage we needed to bring them to their knees. We burst into the control room, and the sight before us was staggering. Rows of servers, blinking lights, and high-tech computers filled the room. This was the heart of the syndicate's operation. Everything they had built, everything they controlled, was here, but it was no longer theirs. It was ours. I rushed to the main console, fingers flying over the keys as I bypassed the security systems. The screens flickered, and I could see the global maps of the syndicates reach their influence over governments, military, business. The power they held was staggering, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had something they didn't, a reason to fight, a reason to win. The child stepped forward, her presence at the console almost overwhelming. The energy around her was palpable, as if the very air itself was reacting to her power. I knew what we had to do. This is it, I said, my voice steady. We'll end this now. With a few more commands, the servers hummed louder, and the lights flickered. The energy in the room grew electric as the child stepped closer, her small hands hovering over the terminal. There was a pause, a beat of silence, and then everything changed. The screens went black, the machines powered down. The syndicate's global network, its web of control, went dark. We had done it. The fight wasn't over. There would be fallout. The syndicate would retaliate. But for the first time, we had the upper hand. The power had shifted. We turned, and as we made our way out of the control room, I glanced back at the child, her face lit with a quiet fire.
Ow.
This wasn't just about survival anymore.
Ow.
This was about freedom for her, for all of us. We did it, I said, a smile breaking through the tension in my chest. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what came next, we had already won. The syndicate's grip was slipping, and we were taking back the future.